At the edge of the great forest lived a poor woodcutter
with his wife
and his 2 children.
A boy called Hansel
and a girl called Gretel.
The family had little sweets the best of times.
And what's more, there was a famine in the land.
And often the father couldn't even afford their daily bread. One night,
as he lay in bed worrying about their poverty,
he sighed and said to his wife,
"What's going to become of us? How can we keep the children fed when we haven't any food for ourselves?"
I'll tell you what, this is what we'll do. Early tomorrow morning, we'll take them into the thickest part of the forest. Make them comfortable, light a fire to keep them warm, give them a little bit of bread, then leave them there by themselves. They won't find their way home, and we'll be rid of them.
No, I don't want that. Abandon my own children in the forest? Never! Wild animals will tear them to pieces.
You're a fool. If we don't get rid of them, all 4 of us will starve. You may as well start playing the wood for our coffins.
She gave him no peace until he gave in.
But I don't like it. I can't help feeling sorry for them.
In the next room, the children were awake. They couldn't sleep because they were so hungry.
And they heard every word their stepmother said. And Gretel wept bitterly and whispered,
Oh, Hansel, it's the end for us.
Hush, stop worrying. I know what we can do.
As soon as the grown-ups had fallen asleep,
Hansel got out of bed,
Put on his old jacket.
opened the lower half of the door,
And crept outside.
the moon was shining brightly.
And the white pebbles in front of the house glittered like silver coins.
Hansel crouched down and filled his pockets with as many as he could cram in.
Then he went back inside, got into bed, and whispered,
Don't worry, Gretel. Go to sleep now. God will look after us. Anyway, I've got a plan.
At daybreak, even before the sun had risen, the woman came in and pulled the covers off their bed.
Get up, lay out! We're going into the forest to get some wood. She gave them each a piece of dry bread. That's your lunch. Don't gobble it up too soon, because there's nothing else.
Gretel put the bread in her apron.
Because Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles.
As they went off into the forest,
As the afternoon went past and the light faded, they leaned closer together
And fell sound asleep. They awoke to find themselves in darkness.
Gretel began to cry.
How can we ever find our way out?
Wait till the moon comes up. Then you'll see how my plan will work.
When the moon did come up, it was full and brilliant. And the white stones that Hansel had dropped shone like newly minted coins.
hand in hand, the 2 children followed the trail all through the night.
And just as dawn was breaking, they arrived at their father's house.
The door was locked.
So they knocked loudly. When the woman opened it, her eyes opened too, in shock.
You wretched children! You made us so worried!
And she hugged them so tightly.
They couldn't breathe! Why'd you sleep so long? We thought you didn't want to come back. And she pinched their cheeks.
As if she were really glad to see them.
When their father came down a moment later, the relief and joy in his face was real. Because he hadn't wanted to leave them in the first place.
So that time, they were safe. Early the next morning, the woman came in and woke them up as she'd done before.
And gave them each a piece of bread.
So it was even smaller this time.
As they went off into the forest,
Hansel crumbled his bread up and dropped the crumbs on the path.
Stopping every so often to make sure he could see.
Hansel, keep going! Stop looking back all the time.
I was looking at my pigeon, sitting on the roof. He wants to say goodbye to me.
That's not your pigeon, you fool. That's the sun shining on the chimney. Stop dawdling.
Hansel didn't look back.
but he kept on crumbling up the bread in his pocket and dropping it along the path.
The woman made them all walk fast.
And they went deeper into the forest than they've ever been in their whole lives.
Finally, she said, this'll do.
And once again they made a fire for the children to sit by.
Now, don't you move. Sit here and don't budge until we come and get you. We've got enough to worry about without you wandering off. We'll be back in the evening.
The children sat there until they thought it must be midday.
And then they shared Gretel's little piece of bread.
Because Hansel has used all his up. Then they fell asleep. And the whole day went by.
But no one came for them.
It was dark when they woke up.
Hush, don't cry. Wait till the moon comes up. Then we'll see the crumbs and find our way home.
The moon came up and they began to look for crumbs.
But they couldn't find any.
The thousands of birds that fly about in the fields and woods had pecked them all up.
We'll find our way.
But no matter which way they went, they couldn't find their way home.
They walked all through the night.
And all through the following day.
But still, they were lost.
And they were hungry too.
Terribly hungry.
Because the boys had to eat a few berries they found.
They were so tired by this time, they laid down under a tree.
And at once the children fell asleep. When they woke on the third morning,
And struggled to their feet.
They were still lost.
And with every step they seemed to be taking, they were going deeper and deeper into the forest.
If they didn't find help soon, they'd die!
But at midday they saw a snow-white bird sitting on a branch nearby. It sang so beautifully that they stopped to listen. And when it stretched its wings and flew a little way ahead,
They followed it.
It perched and sang again.
and again flew a little way ahead, moving no faster than they could walk.
So that it really seemed to be guiding them.
And all of a sudden, they found themselves in front of a little cottage.
And the bird perched on the roof. There was something strange about the look of the roof.
In fact,
It
was made of cake.
and as for the walls,
They were made of
bread. As for the windows,
They were made of sugar!
the poor children were so hungry they didn't even think of knocking and asking for permission.
Hansel broke off a piece of the roof.
And Gretel knocked through a window.
The children were so hungry they started eating and sat down right where they were.
After a good few mouthfuls, they heard a soft voice from the inside.
The children answered,
The wind's so wild.
The heavenly child. They went on eating.
They were so ravenous.
Hansel liked the taste of the roof so much that he pulled off a chunk as big as his arm.
And Gretel carefully pushed out another window pane and started crunching her way through it.
Suddenly, the door opened.
And an old woman came hobbling out.
The children were so surprised they stopped eating and stared at her with their mouths full.
The old woman shook her head and said,
Don't be frightened, dear. Come inside. Who brought you here? Come bury yourself in my box of treats. It's as safe as houses.
She pinched their cheeks fondly.
and took them each by the hand.
And led them into the cottage.
As if she'd known they were coming. And there was a table laid with 2 plates. With a delicious meal of milk
And pancakes with sugar and spices.
and apples.
And nuts.
After that, she showed them into a little bedroom where 2 beds were made up ready with snow-white sheets.
Hansel and Gretel went to bed.
Thinking they were in heaven.
And fell asleep at once. But the old woman had only pretended to be friendly.
In fact, she was a wicked witch and had only pretended to be friendly and had only built her delicious home in order to bear children to her.
Once she captured the child, whether a boy or girl,
She killed them, cooked them, and ate them.
It was a feast day for her when that happened.
like other witches, she had red eyes and couldn't see very far.
But this witch had a great sense of smell and knew when little children were nearby.
When Hansel and Gretel were tucked up ready in bed, the witch rubbed her hands together and laughed.
I've got them now! They won't get away from me!
Early next morning, she got up, went into their room, and looked at them lying there asleep.
She could barely keep her hands from their full red cheeks.
Nice mouthfuls.
She thought. And then she seized Hansel.
But before he could utter a cry, she dragged him out of the cottage and into a little shed, where she shut him in it. In the morning, Gretel had to light a fire under the oven.
Come on! I've kneaded the dough and I've got the bread ready. You just need to get the oven ready.
She dragged Gretel to the oven door.
Firing sparks were flaring under the iron floor.
Come on, see if it's hot enough.
Of course, the witch had intended to shut the door when Gretel was inside and cook her as well.
But Gretel saw what she was up to, so she said,
I don't quite understand. You want me to get in there? How can I do that?
Stupid goose, get out the way. I'll show you, it's easy enough.
And she bent down and put her head inside the oven.
As soon as she did that, Gretel shoved her so hard that she overbalanced and fell in.
she closed the door and secured it with an iron bar.
Horrible shrieks, screams, and howls came from the oven.
But Gretel closed the rose and ran outside.
The witch burned to death.
Gretel ran to the shed and cried,
Hansel, we're safe! The old witch is dead!
Hansel leaped out joyfully